Okay, this was a cool post. Every once in a while, I see a post.
Big picture. You made a comment that I don't do the sounds enough when you're here.
I hate everything about what you are and what you've become and what you will ever be.
Thank you.
Occasionally, I see a post or some sort of I guess a post is the right word, on social, and it sparks in me the thought of, hey, this is a segment idea.
Oh, okay.
And this one did. Brian Rice, friend of the show, since day one. He's helped us out with the newsletter, various other things.
Sweet guy.
He put out this thing, and it was kind of interesting. I'm just going to read a little bit. I'm going to paraphrase some. He's wordy. He knows that. I think he knows that.
I thought he did. He cut this down very well.
For Brian, this could have been 9 pages. That guy can freaking write like I can talk. In the last 15 years, we've gotten to watch 3, Tom Brady, Peyton, Patrick Mahomes, of the top 5 greatest quarterbacks, and 5 of the top 10 when you consider Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. We've watched greatness, and instead of appreciating the rarity, it's created this culture in the hobby basically of like, well, the who's next. We keep seeing this guy's the greatest. It says, this is resulting in card collectors paying thousands of dollars for rookie cards of QBs that won't even be top 10 in any given season, let alone top 10 all time. Becoming an all-time great is rare, and it could be years until we see another quarterback do it. Then he lists some names at the end. Ritter, Fields, Purdy, Love, Bryce Young. The list goes on. Will never be elite. Even Justin Herbert, who has great tools, looks like Phillip Rivers 2.0. And he did ask for thoughts. So I thought this was an interesting take. First of all, I disagree with some of these little things, but it's not a big deal. Patrick Mahomes is not a top 5 quarterback of all time yet. He probably will be. He's the most talented quarterback of all time. GOAT status like that requires a resume. But to his point, fine. He's definitely top 10. I also don't think Drew Brees is top 10 all time. But again, semantics, it doesn't matter. His point is over the last 25 years, because Peyton came in 98, we have seen 5 of what some people could argue are the top 10 and 2 of the top 3 of all time.
Okay.
Which I would argue, Peyton and Tom. Why are we chasing the next guy? Here was the first thing that came to my mind, though. I'm gonna play a little experiment game with you. I don't know what you just drank. Your face looks like you just kissed a skunk.
I was drinking this Monster on Thursday's episode, and I left a little in there, and I just took a little sip, and it was not as good.
Your eyes are watering. Like, what's wrong with you?
They're fine. I'm fine. Okay. I'm fine. Ask the question.
Here is my initial thought to this was, this happens every 20 years, though. Every 20 years is the next greatest guy, no matter what. It's almost historic that we've seen this. So take out those 5 guys we just saw. I'll throw a few names to you that people probably would have argued were top 10 before that. You've heard of some of these. Joseph Montana.
Yes.
Obviously you've heard
Joe.
of him. Yeah, Joe. A lot of people still say number 2 all time, 2, 3 to me, whatever.
Okay.
John Elway.
Sure.
Of course you've heard Elway. I think Elway is a top 5. Quite frankly, I think you could argue Elway is 3 or 4, but whatever. Top 5 guy and still in the top 10.
Can I guess your next one?
You're going to guess it, and you're going to be wrong, but I could see why you... Go ahead, say it.
Dan Marino.
Oh, correct. I thought you were going to say Troy Aikman. Dan Marino, most people still have top 10 all time. Back then especially, you take out these 5, he's probably top 5 all time, or right in the conversation.
Yeah.
Even a guy like, taking out these 5, Troy Aikman, coming off 3 Super Bowls. Not the elite passer these guys were, but it wasn't a passing league. That's just 80s and 90s guys.
Yeah. Okay.
All those guys were literally the generation before the Peyton, Brady, Brees, Rodgers.
Yes.
So I could have made the same case then. Hey, we're seeing this whole new crop of top 10s. Okay, so let's go back a generation before that. Obviously, I'm not nearly as familiar with 70s, call it, late 60s into the 70s, but just some of the all-time great quarterbacks from that generation who at the time, and I would argue still, Roger Staubach, a lot of people will still say is top 10 all-time. He's a 70s guy.
Yep.
Terry Bradshaw, at the time, winning 4 Super Bowls in a decade, top 10 at least of that time. And even Fran Tarkenton. When Tarkenton retires, he was the all-time leader in every category under the sun. Oh, the other guy we forgot for the 90s was like Brett Favre.
I don't know if it makes you feel any better, but Fox Sports agrees with your top 3.
Of all time?
For the 70s.
Give me that list, actually. That's interesting.
So the 3 you just mentioned.
So Fran,
Staubach was 1, Tarkenton was 2, Bradshaw was 3. Number 4 was Ken Stabler.
Yep.
5 was Bob Grease.
Greasy, yep.
6 was Burt Jones.
Okay, now we're in obscurity. That guy's on a sitcom.
I don't recognize any of the names.
And then if you're going to go even a generation before that, going back to the 60s, and again, I'm going to forget because 60s, but at the time, Unitas and Starr were the 2 most prolific, like those were the guys. Almost like a Peyton and Brady. I guess my thing is when you break this down to, hey, we have all these established top 10 guys, why are guys chasing the next top 10? or the next 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time, I would say, well, maybe that's why. Because every 10, 20 years, we see this shuffle out anyways. Do I think Desmond Ridder is going to be a top? I don't think anybody playing right now, aside from the people we've mentioned, is going to be top 5. Statistically, none of them will be. But historically, somebody who has been drafted in the last 5 years or the next 2 or 3 years is probably going to be top 10. Every generation we see this.
The fact that he said the issue that I had with the overall article, I liked his take, except for the fact that you're already calling out that those ones that you mentioned at the end, Ridder, Fields, Purdy, Love,
Are
Young,
not going to be elite.
are not. Well, he even says will never be elite. That's where I see Purdy play, and it's like, wow. Like, I don't know. I feel like he could have that potential. And that's where all of this starts to fall apart for me is if you are into trying to find that next guy, that's the thing. You don't know who the next guy will be. And to your point, this is where you're seeing a shuffling where the next greatest may be coming right now from this class or last year's class or somewhere around here. So to say that it won't be, that's where I just kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that take.
Yeah, because even to build on that point, if you go through the names he mentioned that are already solidified, Tom Brady, the first year and a half of his career, nobody thought was going to be a starter in the league. Never mind the greatest of all time.
Sure.
Peyton Manning, now that's a little different. Goes number 1 all time, 20. It's funny, 26 touchdowns, 28 interceptions. I will never forget that stat. I don't know why. His rookie year. People saw potential for eliteness. Like this guy, he's making a ton of the rookie mistakes, but doing enough things right where you're like, man, when he gets it. So with Peyton, you could almost argue worth it at the time. Mm-hmm. With Brady, absolutely not. With Patrick, by the way, it was a year removed from that as well. He didn't come in day 1 and was this unbelievable prolific starter. Drew Brees did not start day 1. Rodgers sat on the bench for years. So the notion, now do I want to pick one of these guys specifically and say this guy will be the guy? No. Because statistically, it's a crazy long shot. But the one constant is some of these guys who are rising from obscurity are going to be, again, I'm not saying one of these, but over the course of 10 years, we've never gone a stretch where we don't see generational talent. We just haven't. Some of these longer shots than others. Like, I would never invest a dime in I think Justin Fields could literally be cleaning this office with my parents in 5 years. Like, I don't think he belongs in the NFL. I think he's terrible.
Okay.
But I've seen enough from Brock Purdy where I think, you know what? Maybe. Even like last night was a great example. Mac Jones and Tua. Now, people crap on Mac Jones. Look what he has done over the first 2.5 years of his career. Mm-hmm. There's potential for him to be elite.
My whole thing is
Tua as well, by the way. He looked unbelievable. Can he stay healthy? I don't know, but there's potential.
The fact that maybe someone doesn't start out great. Justin Fields is from 2021, right? Mm-hmm. He is still so new that all of these guys, to say anybody will or won't be, is just such a closed-minded thought process. If you aren't taking in one of the key differentiators for a lot of these guys is, are they progressing? Are they getting better? Maybe they started out bad and they are still not great, but are they better than what they were? I just think of Jordan Love as far as like no one thought anything of him, and now the last couple of games, like he's up. In the last 3 months, he's up 100% as far as like his Prism PSA 10 values go. It's crazy, right? But it's not to say he is going to be the next guy, but he has definitely gotten better. There was a lot of commentators last night as we were watching the game, just making some similar comments as far as like how he has progressed from 2020 when he first started to now. That's where I think like if there's anybody who has hope, it's these guys who are slowly, if not surely, making strides to do better, to lose those like those mistakes that all newbies tend to make. Like to your point about, who'd you say? Was that Aikman who had those stats, 26, 28, or?
Peyton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing, too, this list also leaves off the 4 most, in my mind, prominent young guys. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and then Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Now, you look at those guys 2 years in, 3 years into their career, like Trevor Lawrence, if you told me in 20 years, hey, he's a top 10 guy all time, okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you said that about any of those 4, it's a little bit of a longer shot with some, but look what Burrow's done for a few years.
Yeah.
Herbert as well, statistically unbelievable. If he gets some postseason success, all of a sudden he's in that discussion. That's why like the thought of, this is to a bigger point, like, why would you ever invest in the young guys when you could just go get the solidified stars? That's the reason I think we've seen so many cycles. And by the way, I am not telling anybody go out and spend huge money on these guys, but I do think it at least sheds some logical light on this chase mentality with young guys of, hey, I want the next guy. By the way, I think it extends to other sports. It takes a little bit longer, and football has a huge advantage. Basketball has become such a soft game that the all-time greats we almost glorify and put higher than they would be in this generation.
Okay. That's interesting.
Kobe's great. Like, Kobe's a fringe top 10 guy for most. Younger guys will tell you he's like the second best of all time because they're young and stupid. And Kobe's a bad example. He played now anyways. Bill Russell, though. Like, you talk about guys like Bill and Wilt. It's like, yeah, but they played in such tough generations, and like it was a different game. And Magic and Larry, it was physical, and you could punch a guy in the face and get a technical, not even get suspended. We almost downgrade the level we see now. But even in the NBA, in a couple of years, like especially on the path, like Giannis and Joker are in that discussion of top 10 all time. Steph, KD are already top 15 all time. LeBron, in my opinion, is number 2 all. Even the NBA, though, it's like we're not that far removed from the last 2 guys. 96 was Kobe. 97 was Duncan, who are top 10 guys all time. 2003 was LeBron. After that, I mean, go KD was 2007, arguably a top 10, top 15. Curry, 2009. What else did we say? Giannis was 2013 and Joker was 2015. It's not like it's every 30 years there's a top 10 guy.
15. Yeah, okay.
Like, we're seeing these guys in every sport because that's just kind of the generation we live in. I think it's always been like that.
Do you think, too, like, as we go, I know you made the point of, like, you know, in the old days it was a much more physical game, but now we see that there are people who are more skilled at certain positions depending on the sport.
Football is hang on. To that point right there, by the way, that is the other advantage football has. Basketball is a more skilled game, but it's less of a team game. It's less appealing for the older generation to watch, so they're always going to knock these guys because they couldn't do what the other guys did.
Yeah.
In football, it's not that way. In football, when Aikman was throwing 20 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, it was unbelievable.
Sure.
Now a guy goes 40-12, and he's like 8th in MVP voting. The skill of the position and the progression of the sport in football is more apparent now than in any other sport, in my opinion.
Well, and that's where I think, like, these whole discussions of top 10, top 15, whatever you want to call it, I think you just start seeing some of these guys get knocked off. They were still great. Nothing has changed about how great they were. It's just that others have come in with a more dominant skill set in that position that bumps the guys that used to play out because they didn't have either the knowledge or the game's changed in a way that has affected new guys for the better.
And a lot of it, too, has to do with greatness against your opponents. That's always, to me, that's always a major because, like, Unitas had crap stats compared to today's people, but he was elite compared to everybody he was playing against. That means he was great.
Yeah.
Like, I equate that in my head was if him and Bart Starr were that much better than everybody else at the time, plug them into this generation, same thing.
Exactly.
I think they would still be great now. It's not as if, like, Matthew Stafford has elite numbers all time. Matthew Stafford's not an elite quarterback. Now, he wouldn't have been in the 90s and 80s. He wouldn't have been he's just not an elite talent. He's very good. His stats don't make him elite, though.
Yeah.
Even though the numbers are elite compared to, like, he's thrown for more yards than those guys we just mentioned ever will. Staubach's another example. A lot of people say one of the greatest pure passers of all time. His card value is crazy low compared to what we see now. But Staubach was as good as anybody in his generation. He would still be that today.
Yeah.